Welcome everybody. So I've got, the first thing you want to do, no matter what you're doing with cheese, is make sure you've got everything set up and everything is clean. So I've kind of got my table all set up. I've got my milk. I've made sure my pots and everything are clean. I also, over on the stove, I've actually started a pot of water because in order for mozzarella to stretch, you need about 175-degree water to heat it up. So I've got that already going. So that'll be ready when our mozzarella is ready. Citric acid, you can buy it from a cheese supply place. And I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of citric acid to about a cup of water.
So what's the citric acid doing for us, Gail, in this process?
The citric acid is going to acidify the milk. So it's going to do the job that the cultures would do by converting that lactose to lactic acid. It's kind of a, and I'm going to pour it into my milk and I'm going to give it a good stir. When you add it, you will notice that sometimes you'll get some little flecks, and that's...
Go a little higher if you can.
Higher.
Yeah.
Yep. There. And that's basically because by acidifying, even at this temperature, we've started to cause some of those proteins to precipitate. So I'm going to start out, I want to heat my milk up to 90 degrees. And you can do this right on your stovetop. It takes a while. You've got a big heavy duty pot and 45 degree milk. It takes a bit to get it. So you can do it fairly quickly on a fairly high burner, but you don't want to like go from 0 to 60 in 5 minutes. You don't want to burn your milk and you don't want to scorch your milk. So while you're doing it, you want to stir it periodically to make sure that the milk at the bottom of the pot. So, and the thing about rennet, so rennet, I use a double strength microbial rennet. All rennets, no matter which one you get, are light sensitive and heat sensitive. So I always wrap my bottle up in foil and I keep it refrigerated. So for this gallon of milk, I'm going to use an 1/8+ of a teaspoon of this. So I'm going to dilute it in cool water. So I'm going to take my milk off the heat and I'm going to stir in my rennet.
So I see you diluted it in the water, but then you also poured it through your slotted spoon.
Right, I do that to help just distribute it really evenly. The rennet is diluted in water because it's really strong, and you want to make sure that your rennet is interacting with all of the milk molecules and not just where the first ones they hit. All right, so I've stirred this and I'm going to, using my spoon, I'm going to kind of stop the motion. Cover it and I'm going to let it sit for 5 minutes. So basically, the rennet is now interacting with those casein molecules and it's going to cause the curd to form. The curd, it's definitely not a liquid anymore. It's kind of more of a custard. And now we're going to cut it. This is a cheese knife. You don't have to have a cheese knife. Any kind of long knife will work. You just want to make sure it can reach to the bottom of the pot. And so I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to cut it like a checkerboard. So I'm going to hold my knife vertically, and I'm going to cut 1 inch. When your curd has set well, you will notice that the liquid that's getting released is kind of a pale yellow, and that's what you want it to be. That's your whey. Okay, so I've cut a checkerboard. So now my curd is basically all columns, and I want to cut those columns also. So I'm going to hold my knife more at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to try to go in where I cut before, and I'm going to cut around.
Oh yeah, we can start to see it now. I'm seeing the whey and the curds separate.
Yep. All right. And this isn't exact. You don't have to worry if your cut is exact. Now I'm going to let this, I like to let this sit for 5 more minutes. And basically what I'm doing is in cheese terms is I'm healing my curd. I'm letting the curd that just got cut form kind of a film all the way around the sides of it. And that way it'll hold more moisture inside of it, including the fat.
So that's a little bit of a, you can see a before and after now that we're going to wait for the healing process.
Yeah, so as this sits, by the end of the 5 minutes, you'll really clearly see the distinct lines of the yellowish whey coming up with the white curd separating out. And whenever you're using rennet for a cheese, if you go to cut your curd, say your recipe says to let it sit for 5 minutes or 30 minutes. When you go to cut, if you don't notice that yellow liquid, it's not ready to cut. So in that case, you want to just leave it longer. My curds are just kind of floating around. So now we want to heat this up to 110 degrees. All right. So I'm going to put my probe back in here. So this curd is a really, really soft curd. If you were making a hard cheese, it would be a much firmer curd. You would have added more rennet. You would have let the rennet work for longer. So I'm going to start gently stirring this.
Yeah, those are really soft.
And you'll see they start to break, but that's okay.
I see the yellow, so we still are looking for a yellow whey and a relatively soft curd.
Yes. And it's okay if the curd starts to break up. And what you'll see is, like right now, the curd looks really soft and just kind of merging on itself. And as we cook this, you'll start to see that the curd becomes very distinct pieces, and will hold its own to any kind of stirring. You can probably see that a lot of my curd has kind of broken up. It's not in distinct squares anymore.
And that's okay?
That's absolutely fine. Don't worry about that.
So what are possible things that could go wrong at this point? What should we be looking for? It's like, whoa, that's not what I thought.
If you're not seeing the yellow whey and it's still very milky, You will still get some cheese out of it, but your yield will be way down because basically you're leaving a lot of the proteins and the fat in the whey portion. It's no longer in, it's not in your curd. So I'm up to about 98 degrees now, and you can see the curds are becoming more distinct pieces as opposed to just kind of a mushy, for lack of better terms. That's not a scientific term there. All right, so I'm up to 110, and I'm going to take my pot off the heat again. I'm going to let it go for about 2 minutes. And I'm going to just stir it maybe once or twice. And I don't know if you can see it now, but the curd are very distinct pieces. So it's sat for a couple minutes, and I'm ready to, I want to start draining that curd. So I've got a colander, and I'm just going to drain it into the bowl that I will eventually be stretching the cheese in. So let's see. Don't need to worry about my temperature anymore. And I'm going to ladle my curd right out of here. Thank you, Flip. It's tempting to just pour your curds in whey, which you can do, but by doing that, you're allowing a lot more of the whey to stay in the curd, and it's going to take a lot longer to drain it. I like to use my slotted spoon to get that curd out of there. And depending on how fastidious you are, you can either get every last little curd out, or you can call it quits after a bit. And the interesting thing is, goats love whey also, and it's actually it's a nice nutritional beverage for them, it's quite a humorous sight to see a goat stick her head down into the stock pot and just start to suck up all the whey. So I have to alternate. The chickens get the whey sometimes, and the goats get the whey sometimes. Water buffalo mozzarella is kind of the creme de la creme of mozzarella. It's water buffalo milk is high in fat and very high in proteins. It makes just incredible mozzarella. What you'll find though is this kind of quick mozzarella is a drier mozzarella, so it shreds really nice, but it's not that fresh, soft, oozy mozzarella that you know, if you buy fresh mozzarella in the grocery store or at a creamery. If you want to make it for fresh mozzarella, you really almost have to use cultures. The other recipe that we've included for this hybrid mozzarella is kind of, it's a cross. It uses both some cultures and some citric acid. And it takes, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 hours to make. It's not all active. You can go off and do other things while it's, but it's more like a fresh, soft mozzarella.
So in that scenario, are we looking at a lower yield because it's a less fatty milk, or is it a texture or flavor thing? What's the difference between a cow and a goat's milk mozzarella?
There really is no difference. Depending on, you know, so whether it's goats or cows, the amount of fat in their milk really depends on the breed of the animal. So certain breeds of cows produce much more butter fat. A Jersey cow or Guernsey will produce less milk than a Holstein, but it's a higher butter fat. All right, so I've got that going. So I'm going to let that drain for about 10 minutes. So now, once we have our mozzarella made, we want to chill it, but also kind of salt it. I'm going to need a little bit of that.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Then you can take it. So I've got a quart of cool water, and I'm going to add, there, a couple tablespoons of the whey, and I'm going to add some sea salt, and or kosher salt. Now, kosher salt is, you can also just buy what's called cheese salt from a cheese supplier. But what you want to make sure with your salt is that it doesn't have other agents added to it. So like a lot of kosher salts, if you read the ingredients, it will list salt, and then it'll have anti-caking agents added. And you really want to avoid that. All right, so I'm going to let that just sit. All right, so I basically have just taken some of my hot water, and I'm going to let it warm my bowl up. I tend to use glass bowls. You could use a stainless bowl. That would be fine. You just want to make sure that you don't chill it. So I'm going to, let's see. I'm actually just going to stretch half of this at a time. It really depends more on what size balls of mozzarella you want. I think you'd find to try to stretch from a whole gallon in one stretch would be quite challenging. Often at home, I will do a third. Yeah. So you see, it's made a mat. And I'm just going to take and cut it into some pieces. I'm going to be adding it to that. So I've taken my mat, and I've just broken it into pieces, an inch, inch and a half. All right, and so now I'm going to add this to my pre-warmed bowl. And I'm going to start ladling. So my water's at about 175. And I'm going to ladle my hot water on top of it. So this is hot. This is where kitchen gloves come in very handy. You can't put your hand in there or you will burn yourself. Some people like to use spoons. I just find a pair of kitchen gloves really works the best. So I'm gonna kind of work this just gently. See if I can't start getting those curds to really stick together and melt. And you can see my curds have already started to kind of melt together, which is good. So I've got a nice mass now, and I'm going to start trying to stretch it a bit. And you'll see as I stretch it, it's becoming a bit glossier and shiny, and will stretch really nicely out.
Oh yeah, getting a little more action there.
Yeah. It should stretch kind of like a good taffy. So you can see I've got a beautiful stretch now. It's nice and glossy.
That's awesome.
So I'm gonna kind of fold it up on itself again, submerge it a little bit. Now I'm gonna form a ball. And to do that, you wanna kind of make a C with your one hand, and you just kind of work the cheese up through that C. Give it another submerge. And there, you got a beautiful, nice ball of mozzarella. And you can, other side, you can kind of pinch off, pinch into itself. All right, so now I'm gonna put that in my brine and let that start to cool down a bit.
So right now, what's the process right now? You're just getting it to cool down. Is it
I'm
firming
cooling
up,
it
or?
down, and it's salting it.
Okay.
Some recipes will have you sprinkle salt on the curd before you start to stretch it. And you can do it that way. I find that, at least for my taste, this adds plenty of salt.
Someone was wondering about the shelf life of it, how long it lasts in the brine, how you're storing it.
Okay, I wouldn't store it in the brine. I'll leave it in here for maybe half an hour or so, and then I will wrap it tight in foil, in saran plastic wrap, and refrigerate it. And it's good in the refrigerator for probably a week. If you want to store it longer, wrap it in that saran wrap, put it in a nice heavy duty Ziploc bag, and throw it in your freezer.
So excellent. Thank you all so much for joining us, and reach out anytime with questions to harvestkitchen@cornell.edu. We're excited to have a whole series of preservation classes this summer, everything from fermentation to dehydration to canning. So we'll make the most of our garden bounty once the weather starts to warm and our soil is growing good stuff. So thanks for joining us. Thank you so much, Gail.
My pleasure.
We love you sharing. You're so generous with your knowledge, and we really appreciate that.
Happy cheese making.
All right. Take care, everybody.